And welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. And by hook or by crook, we've gotten on the air tonight on Facebook Live. Our co-host Ross Grimsley is with us, and he's down right outside of Sarasota, Florida. Ross, how are you?
Everything's going great, buddy. How are you doing?
All right, you look great. You look tan, rested, and relaxed.
Hey, we've been on the beach. We've been golfing. It's been a good time.
All right, we've got the real McCoy with us tonight. And
Yes,
I'm going to introduce him in just a second. But first, I got to tell you that PressBox Live is brought to you by C3 American Exteriors. Go to their website at c3america.com to get a brand new roof for just the cost of your insurance deductible. And I alluded to the real McCoy. It's somebody I've admired for a long, long time. We've become a little bit of Facebook acquaintances, and that is one of the great baseball writers of all time. That is Hal McCoy of the Dayton Daily News. Hal, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Ross. Great to see you again, buddy, after 20 years. Or 50 years, whatever.
50 years, exactly. 50 years.
50.
They go by so fast, I can't even count them.
I know.
Hey, Hal, you started covering the Cincinnati Reds in what season?
1973.
73. So, Ross, was that your first year as a Baltimore Oriole?
That was my last year with the Reds. So that's 73.
So Hal kicked you out.
Yeah, basically.
I got to cover him 1 year, and I never could understand why the Reds traded him.
Because they got the great Merv Rettenman, right?
Yeah.
That's
At least I got a good tennis partner.
Yeah.
Hey, Hal, before we start talking specifically baseball and your long, illustrious career covering one of the, real landmark franchises in the league, I did want to ask you this, because Ross and I were talking about Jim Henneman coming down to Sarasota, and you said, hey, I'm leaving. I got my 2 vaccines, and I'm leaving for Florida tomorrow. And I said, the Reds practice now spring training in Arizona. I said, do you just love Sarasota? And your answer was?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite places on earth. I stayed there for 10 years when the Reds trained in Sarasota. I stayed on Siesta Key in the Palm Bay Club, right on that beautiful sugary beach. And my wife loves it, and we're coming down to spend a week. When the Reds moved to Arizona, my wife wouldn't go spring training. She said, I'm not going, honey, because there's no beach. And I said, honey, it's all beach. There's just no water.
Right. Exactly.
So did you, the Reds used to play in what is still Ed Smith Stadium. Have you seen Ed Smith Stadium since it's been refurbished over about 8 years ago?
Yes, I saw it last year. My wife and I came down and spent a week last year, and I stopped out there to see what it looked like. It wasn't, of course, during spring training. It was during the summer. Nobody was around, but I hardly recognized the old place.
Yeah, they did a wonderful job on the place. Ross, I'm going to give you the next couple of questions, Ross.
I know. I'm kind of surprised. Was it better than Redsland?
Better than Redsland? Yeah, definitely better than Plant City. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, no kid. Hey Hal, I know you've covered 7,000 ball games. You started, like I said, in 73. You got to see the Big Red Machine win a couple of world champions. And with the Big Red Machine, I know 1990 you saw the world champions. You were, broke the news about Pete Rose and Marge Schott. Can you kind of fill us in a little bit on some of the highlights of each and one of those things? I know the Big Red Machine, that was just the beginning of it. 72, we went to the World Series, but that was the beginning of that.
And don't be bashful, Hal. Did you name them the Big Red Machine?
Yeah, I did, but I have to share credit with Big Bopper Lee May. I was even the beat writer when I did that. It was 1968, and I was backup writer then, and I was covering a game, and the Reds were behind the Dodgers like 8-2 in the 8th inning. And the Reds came back and won the game 9-8, and I went into the clubhouse, and Lee May is shouting, "We're a machine. We're just a machine." And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. So I went back up in the club, in the press box, and started writing my story. And I wrote the machine, and I stopped to think about it. And I thought, well, how about a big machine, big red machine. So I wrote Big Red Machine, and it kind of caught on. And I wish I'd have put a trademark on it, and I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Well, you know what they called the rest of us?
Yeah, I remember.
We had the T-shirts made and what.
T-shirts, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
We can tell Stan he doesn't care.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. What do you, what they call you?
It was a big red machine, and then the rest of us were known as the Big Red Turds.
Yeah.
And we
all had T-shirts, one on Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty good. But tell us a little bit about the world champion. The two world champions actually the three, but the Big Red Machine. Rose, Bench, Perez, Morgan, all those guys. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's I was just starting out. It was only my second year of covering baseball, and the Reds are winning every game, and I'm thinking, wow, this is how it's going to be all the time. And didn't quite turn out that way. About 1982, when they lost 101 games, I got to see the other end. But it was just totally fascinating. I was so fortunate to be able to cover one of the best teams in the history of baseball. You had 8 guys. No baseball team could afford that grade 8 team now. You just be too expensive. They would all be making $25-30 million a year.
Yeah, really.
Nobody would be able to afford it. And I'll never forget after they won in '76 for the second straight time, General Manager Bob Howsam said, "You'll never see another team like this again," because free agency was getting into full throttle right then, and he knew that you wouldn't be able to keep a team together the way that team was. But
right.
to be able to cover Rose and Bench and Morgan and Perez and Geronimo and Concepcion and Griffey and George Foster, just unbelievable.
How important was Sparky Anderson to that, or could a monkey have managed that team?
Yeah, absolutely. I could have managed that team, but they wouldn't let me. But anyway, Sparky knew how to handle people, and he knew mostly to stay out of the way. I'll never forget in the '75 World Series in Game 7, the Reds got behind, and Johnny Bench walked by Sparky and patted him on the knee and said, "Just stay out of the way. We'll win this for you." And, that's kind of the way Sparky operated. He knew how to handle people. He treated Rose and Bench and Morgan differently than the rest of the guys. And he just told the rest of the guys, as Ross called them, the Big Red Turds, that they knew that these guys merited special respect, and they got it.
They were a wonderful team before Joe Morgan got there. But did Joe Morgan do to the Reds what Frank Robinson did to the Orioles, where they were good and he kind of took them up another notch?
Yeah, absolutely. Joe didn't show in Houston what he showed in Cincinnati, but once he got with those other guys and got Rose and Perez and Bench and Foster surrounding him, he was just unbelievable. I mean, he could do it all. And he was probably the last piece they needed. Although the Reds also got their center fielder, Cesar Geronimo, and got one of their starting pitchers, Jack Billingham, in that deal. So
right,
you got 3 more pieces to the Big Red Machine. But no doubt about it, Morgan was the catalyst of everything.
I got to ask you one question about Geronimo. Growing up, I was the biggest Willie Mays fan, and I thought Willie Mays could do no wrong. And then I started watching Paul Blair play center field for the Orioles, and I had to admit that I thought Paul Blair was the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen. But then I started seeing Cesar Geronimo. Was he every bit as good as Blair or anybody else you saw?
Yeah, I write a Sunday column called Ask Hal. And one of the questions this week was name the 3 best center fielders the Reds ever had. And I named Veda, Pinson, and Geronimo about on the same level because they were both fantastic. Of course, Geronimo played in the shadow of the other great superstars, so he didn't get a whole lot of credit.
Yeah.
But man, he could cover foul line to foul line if you asked him to. And
who was the third? Was it Eric Davis?
Yes.
Okay, I just checking. Just
Somebody asked
checking.
why I didn't include Ken Griffey Jr. Well, mostly he played right field for the Reds. So,
Right.
but you brought up a nasty name there to me. You brought up Willie Mays.
Yeah.
I grew up a Cincinnati Red or a Cleveland Indians fan because I grew up in Akron, Ohio, 30 miles from Cleveland. And in 1954, Willie Mays made that catch on Vic Wertz, and I've hated him ever since. But he was,
Ross, go ahead. You got a
Yeah.
couple.
No. Hey, Hal, you were around when Rose, when the story thing broke on him, and you wrote some things about that. How was your relationship with Rose, and was he open with you about, or as open as he could be about the gambling situation?
that was the toughest thing I've ever had to do in my life because I love Pete Rose. You had to, the way he played.
Right.
You go up to him and ask a question and open your notebook, and he'd fill it up for you. Well, when this thing broke, my sports editor called me aside and said, you're going to have to investigate this thing on Rose, and I know you're very close to him. Can you do it? And I said, well, I hope I'm a professional. I'll do it to the best of my ability. Well, all throughout 1989, I had to ask Rose all the tough questions. I had to cover the game, and then also ask him the tough questions. And of course, then when he got banned, it was sort of like kill the messenger. And he didn't speak to me for like 20 years. And that was tough because we were so close. So a few years ago, my wife and I are in Las Vegas, and Pete's in one of the shops signing autographs. And my wife said, hey, there's Pete Rose. Go in there and say hello. And I said, you want to start a riot?
Yeah.
She said, you go in there and say hello. And she kind of pushed me in. And I said, you can't do this. He hates my guts. Well, she pushed me in there, and Pete jumped up, shook my hand, took me behind the table, had our picture taken together, had the photo developed right away, put it in a leather case, and he signed it to a great Hall of Famer from the hit king, Pete Rose. So we made up.
Wow.
That was just totally fantastic. And
Great.
I got to ask you about the Pete Rose thing now. That was then, and this is now. Does it feel like, because of baseball and all of professional sports embracing gambling now, that all that didn't mean a hill of beans, or did baseball take the right tact at the time, and it's just the times have changed?
Yeah, the times have changed. They took the right tactic because it was definitely against the rules. Pete knew it. There's a sign on the clubhouse door that every player reads. That if you gamble on baseball, Rule 21C, you are banned for life. And they did the right thing. The only thing that I think is he has served his punishment. He has spent all this time being banned from the game and not being able to be a part of the game. I don't think that's right. I think he's been punished enough.
Now you know Pete. I mean, you knew him really well when he was a player. If I have it right, and my thing is just a gut feeling I've always had, Hal, is that Pete Rose, once he couldn't play baseball anymore, he needed something to get his juices flowing. Or do you think he bet baseball when he was playing? I think he only bet on the Reds when he was managing. Am I right, or what do you think?
I don't know about that. I can't tell you that. I know that gambling was in his blood. He bet on the horses since he was a kid. He bet on basketball. He bet on baseball. Somebody asked him once why he didn't bet on hockey. He said, what do I know about hockey? But
Right.
But as far as whether he bet on baseball as a player, I don't know. I just don't know.
And one of the other
he
parts,
loved to gamble. I know
he
that.
did love the gamble.
Oh, he
did.
Hey, what year? I can't remember. I should have done my homework today. What year did Rose get to 43 or 44 games straight, the hitting streak? What was that? About 80?
Oh, boy, you got me on that one too. Yeah, it was.
So were you covering that, or was he with the Phillies?
No,
He
was still with the Reds.
He was still with the Reds.
Yeah, I'll never forget when the 44 game streak was stopped. Gene Garber stalked him in the ninth inning, struck him out. And
For the Phillies, right? For the Phillies, ironic.
No, Garber was with the Braves. The Reds.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
Yeah. But anyway, Pete was just hopping mad after the game. He said, he pitched me like it was the seventh game of the World Series. Ross,
Yeah.
pitcher Ross would try to strike him out too.
Ross, you got a couple for Hal?
Oh, no, yeah. Yeah. Hey, Hal, I know you're a big Cleveland Indian fan. What are your thoughts on the Cleveland baseball team?
Well, the Cleveland baseball team right now, they are. You might as well put the two Ohio teams together because they're both in the same mode. They're both getting rid of everybody. They're not adding much of anybody. So I think they're both going to have a long, tough season.
Well, I was getting to the name, the Cleveland Indian name.
Oh, the Indians.
That's right, because I know how you feel about this. I just wanted to hear you.
Absolutely, I think it's absurd. I mean, it's been the Indians forever, and to me, it's kind of I know the other people, the Native Americans, don't feel this way, but to me, it's kind of a tribute to them to have the nickname, even though I guess they consider it not politically correct, but I've known them for all my life.
Well, wasn't that a tribute to a player that an Indian player that played there that was
Louis
Native American? Yeah.
Yeah. The irony of that whole thing with Cleveland, I don't think people are upset about the name. I think the logo of the Yahoo could be definitely, I could understand that being considered offensive.
Yeah.
And I understand the difference between calling a team the Indians, the Braves, the Chiefs, and the Redskins. The Redskins is a pejorative type of name, but the Cleveland Indians have decided to do this, and it looks like they're heading that way.
Yeah.
We've alluded to a lot of the players you've covered. You covered one of the most interesting and colorful and controversial owners in the history of any sport, and that's Marge Schott. What type of relationship did you have with Marge?
Well, I could do a whole show on that one.
And the dog.
And the dog. Well, that's part of the story too. Marge didn't like me very much, and she would never call me by name. She always called me that guy from Dayton. Well, she came up with this thing. Every time I wrote something that she didn't like, she would ban me from the dining room, take away my dining privileges.
Darn.
She got me 3 times. The first time, remember when umpire John McSherry died of a heart attack on opening day?
Yeah.
Well, after the game, Marge always received bouquets of flowers from well-wishers before the season started. Well, when McSherry died, she took a bouquet of those flowers that another fan had sent her, took the card off and put her own card on and sent the used flowers to the umpire's room. Well, one of the employees found out about it and told me, and I wrote about it, and I was out of the dining room. And the second time was she had a breakfast meeting with some of her advertisers, and she ordered several dozen boxes of donuts. Well, when it was over, she had several dozen boxes of donuts left. So for the next couple of weeks, she sold those donuts to her employees in the front office for a quarter apiece. So
naturally,
I wrote about it, and I was out of the dugout.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the third time was, she had the St. Bernard Shotzi, which she let run around the field, and the players hated it. Shotzi would be running around the field during batting practice. Well, one day, of course, Shotzi did her business where she felt like doing it, and she did it right at the shortstop spot on the AstroTurf. And of course, an AstroTurf, you can clean it up, but it left a big brown spot. Barry Larkin came up to me before the game, and he says, "If they think I'm going to die for a ball today, they're crazy." Well, sure enough, about the third inning, somebody hits a ground ball in the hole. Barry goes over, dives for it, comes up, throws a guy out at first. Front of his uniform is completely brown. Well, I wrote about it, and I was out of the dining room.
You're gone.
Yeah, I'm gone again. But Fortunately, my good friend Eric Davis, every time I got thrown out of the dining room, he would send me a pizza to the press box. And, one day I went to my seat in the press box and there was a box of canned goods sitting there that my other writers had contributed so I wouldn't starve to death.
It's great.
I was sitting at my press box seat one day and one of the TV guys came up to me and he was laughing. And I said, "What are you laughing at?" He said, "Well, I was in Marge's office and you know she keeps Shotzi in there." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, she also keeps a copy of the Dayton Daily News on the floor with your column picture on top. And you know what Shotzi uses that for?"
Yeah.
Hal McCoy is our guest from the Dayton
Yeah.
Daily News. Hal, we talked about the Big Red Machine, but we've floated in two names throughout: Barry Larkin and Eric Davis. Is Eric Davis perhaps the greatest player to ever play for the Reds, or do
He's
you think Frank Robinson?
Well, Robbie was a little bit before my time. They
Yeah.
traded him before I would cover the Reds, so I would put Eric right on top. Eric was just had
Okay.
all the tools, power, steal bases, home runs, hit for average, great defense, great arm. To me, he was the best. And if he hadn't gotten hurt so often, I mean, he was stupid enough to run into the walls at Wrigley Field to catch fly balls and uh, dive and tear up his kidney playing in the World Series. He was just a great, great player and a great guy, and still a friend of mine. Every time we see each other, give each other a big hug. I love the guy. Uh, One story in my career, my entire career of 47 years, going on 48, that I wrote that I wish I had never written was about Eric Davis. There was a rumor he was the Reds, he was going to be traded to the Phillies. And I had a couple of contacts with the Phillies. So I contacted them and said, "Is there any truth to this?" And they said, "Oh, no, we're not interested in Eric because we hear that he does some drugs." Well, instead of checking it, I rushed to print and printed it. And Eric called me over to his dressing stall the next day, and he was distraught and very disturbed. He didn't yell at me. He just sat me down and he said, "You'd have to understand where I grew up in South LA, drugs were killing people. I would never touch them." And that was it. That's all he had to say. And he even wrote a book after his career and said some very nice things about me and never mentioned that terribly stupid story that I wrote about him.
Did you ever take the opportunity to write a retraction, or you just let it go? He had quietly talked to you and you left it at that.
Exactly what I
Yeah,
wrote. I wrote a column saying, "No, I was wrong, and here's what Eric had to say," and apologized.
that would have been a great column if you were living back then with getting clicks today. That would have gotten a lot of clicks. I
Exactly.
guarantee you that.
Yeah.
During Marge Schott's ownership of the team, she hired Lou Piniella, who I guess had worked for the most exasperating owner in baseball this side of Marge Schott, and that was George Steinbrenner. How did Lou and Marge get along?
Lou tolerated her. After Shotzi died, Marge got a bag of Shotzi's dog fur, kept it in a cellophane bag, and she would go up before every game and rub it on Lou for good luck.
Jeez.
And Lou hated it, but he tolerated it. Uh, uh, Great story about Lou was he wanted to come back to the Reds the third year he was there, but his contract was expiring, but Marge would not talk to him about an extension. And this kept going and going and going. And it got to be September and there was no extension. And we were in San Diego on a September Friday night. And Lou says to me, "Hal, you have a rental car, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." Well, as Ross probably knows, Lou loved the horses.
Yeah.
And Del Mar was running. So Lou said, "Well, let's go to Del Mar Saturday afternoon before the game." I said, "Okay." So we went up to Del Mar and Lou's hot. He hits the first four races. And I'm looking at my watch and it's about time to get to the ballpark. I said, "Lou, it's about time to go." He said, "Nah, I'm hot. Couple more races." So we do a couple more races and I'm looking at my watch and it's almost batting practice time. And I practically had to drag him out of there. And I said, "Lou, have you got a lineup card or anything?" Nah. We're driving down the interstate toward old Jack Murphy Stadium, and I said to Lou, I said, it's batting practice time, and they don't have a lineup, and you're not there. And he said, "Ah, hell, I don't give a damn. I'm not coming back next year anyway." So I had a great story.
You had a great scoop. Hey, not that we've got to close right now, but I wanted to take you from somebody who used to manage the Reds to somebody who that's managing the New York Yankees now, not a former manager of the Yankees, the current manager of the Yankees, Aaron Boone. Ross, I don't know if you know this story, but I mentioned what I had remembered hearing. Hal, you have quite an eyesight problem, correct? Would that be fair to say?
Yes, I am legally blind.
Legally blind. And could you talk a little bit about, and at that time, when Aaron did what you're going to explain to us, you just knew, I mean, you just covered him. You weren't particularly a great friend or anything, were you at that time?
No, I was just a beat writer.
Yep.
We were in St. Louis in 2001, and I felt a little something in my right eye. And, I tried to rub it out like when you get something in your eye. Well, when I got home, it was still there, didn't go away. So I went to my ophthalmologist, and he looked at it, and he said, "Well, I have some good news and bad news." And I said, "What's that?" He says, "The bad news is you've suffered a stroke in your right eye of your optic nerves. Nothing we can do about it. You just have to hope it doesn't get any worse." I said, "Well, what's the good news?" The good news is it only happens in 15% of the people in both eyes. I thought that's pretty good odds. So about 8 months later, just before time to go to spring training, I got up one morning and my left eye was gone too. I said to my wife, "We just hit the big 15%. I can't cover baseball anymore if I can't see." So I told my sports editor, and he said, "You're going to go to spring training anyway and give it a try." So I decided, okay, I'll go give it a try. So I arrived in Sarasota and went out to Ed Smith Stadium, walked into the clubhouse and stood at the door and looked in at the clubhouse, and everything was dark and blurry and the faces were fuzzy. I couldn't recognize players that had been around for a long time. So Aaron Boone was playing third base for the Reds at the time, and I guess he saw my consternation and got up and came over and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, you're probably seeing me for the last time. I've suffered strokes in both of my optic nerves. I can't see very well. I can't cover baseball." Well, he grabbed me by the elbow and took me over to his dressing stall and told me to sit down on his chair. And I sat down. He pointed his finger at my face and said, "I don't ever want to hear you say the word quit again. You love your job. You're good at your job. And everybody in this clubhouse will help you in any way they can." And that turned me around. That I would have quit in 2001. And because of what he said and a bunch of other support that I've gotten, I'm still doing what I love to do the most. And of course, Aaron made me pay for it. He told people that he caught me talking to a Coke machine. They were probably right.
Now, did Aaron help purchase a piece of equipment that helped you, or do I mix up a story?
No, no, he didn't purchase anything.
Okay, he just talked to you.
He just gave me that tough love. Right.
Okay, that's an amazing story.
Yes, when Aaron was eligible for the Hall of Fame, he was a very good player, but he was not a Hall of Famer. But he got one vote for the Hall of Fame, and I don't think I have to tell you who voted for him.
I hear you. Before we let you go, Ken Griffey. It was a big deal that the Reds acquired Ken Griffey. Jim Bowden, who was the general manager of the Reds at the time, worked out a deal for him. But that trade never really paid the real benefits that Bowden thought he was going to get with acquiring Griffey.
Yeah, the fans in Cincinnati never got to see the real Ken Griffey. They got to see him the first year. He had a really good first year. He had like 33 home runs and drove in 100 runs. Pretty typical Ken Griffey. But then he came up with some leg injuries and some knee injuries, and that plagued him the rest of his career. But I'm going to tell you, he's one of my all-time favorites too. He's just a class act. The year I was voted into the Hall of Fame, we were in Nashville for the baseball winter meetings, and it was announced there that I was going into the Hall of Fame. Not 10 minutes later, my phone rang. And I answered my phone and said hello. And he said, Hal, you know who this is? And I said, yeah, Junior, I recognize your voice. He said, I'm not calling to give you a story or anything. I'm just calling to congratulate you on going into the Hall of Fame. They'll let anybody in, won't they?
Thanks.
Thanks, Junior.
Yeah.
I guess that's a great place to close is what that meant to you to go in. You know, the Hall of Fame each year does it for a broadcaster and a baseball writer. And you went in 2002, winning the award that took you into the Hall of Fame. How meaningful is that to you?
Indescribable. I mean, other than my wife and my family, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Just a kid growing up poor in Lakemore, Ohio, loving baseball from the time I was born almost, and to have my peers vote me that award and put me in the Hall of Fame. I never signed an autograph in my life, and now it's amazing. I still get letters in the mail asking for my autograph, and people recognize me everywhere I go, and it's very flattering, and I've been very, very fortunate. If you hang around long enough, good things happen to you.
Yeah. Hal McCoy, one of the best baseball writers this country has ever produced. And Hal, I know how much you love covering the game of baseball. So I know you love the game of baseball. In wrapping up here, you think and I'm never going to really be worried about baseball's ability to come back. But do
Right.
you think we're really headed into a problem next year with the end of the basic agreement?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've had peace for a long time now, but I think the way things are developing, it doesn't look good. And I'm not real happy with the way the Commissioner Rob Manfred is directing the game now anyway. I mean, I am so old school. I am one room schoolhouse when it comes to baseball. I mean, I didn't like, I don't like interleague play. I don't like the DH. And I certainly don't like 7-inning doubleheaders, and I don't like putting a guy on second base extra inning. I mean, what are they doing to the poor pitchers, Ross?
It's unbelievable. I could go on. We could talk for hours about this.
It's unbelievable. That's what
It's crazy.
we love. I know.
Hey Hal, I know you're a good friend of Jimmy Henneman's, and I believe you guys are going to be down in Sarasota at the same time. I'm going to email you his phone number,
Please do.
and I'll text him and tell him you're coming down, and he
Jim's
might get a call from you. Okay?
He's a great guy. Yeah, I'd love to. Please
Yeah.
do.
Well, we love Jimmy. He does some stuff for us. It's
Right.
really been a joy to talk to you, Hal McCoy.
Thank you, guys. Ross,
Thanks, Al.
I'll see you again in 50 years, buddy.
I hope so.
All right. The great
Take
Hal
care,
McCoy
man.
of the Dayton Daily News has been our guest tonight. A real joy. And we'll let you know that Press Box Live is brought to you by C3 American Exteriors. Go to their website at c3america.com to get a brand new roof for just the cost of your insurance deductible. Gary Stein and I will be on Wednesday night, and we'll talk to Keith Mills of Baltimore and WBAL. Thank you again, Hal McCoy. And Ross, thank you. And good night,
Yes, sir.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.